Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Walk Beside Me. My name is Brooklyn Bird, and we're talking today and every day about how the gospel of Jesus Christ applies to parenting. You guys, I am so happy right now for so many reasons. The biggest one being that our sweet baby, second baby in our family, arrived just this past Friday. We let this one be a surprise. If you know me, you probably already know what the baby's gender is, but I'm going to save that info for the end of this podcast because this episode is going to be a play-by-play of baby bird number 2's birth story. I'm gonna have some special guests on this episode. The first one being the baby. Baby is laying on the bed next to me right now and will probably be making some noises throughout the podcast. So I hope you enjoy all the tender newborn noises. And then the second guest will actually be my husband. I'm going to let him tell a certain part of the birth story that he will just tell better than I could. It's a special moment that he is responsible for. I'm super excited. For those who don't know me, a little bit about me, I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have been a Christian my whole life. I've loved Jesus my whole life, but I've never really understood his love for me until I became a mom. And let's be honest, I still can't fully comprehend it because it is so big. But becoming a mom has opened my eyes to the way that Jesus Christ feels about us more than anything else in this life ever could. Before I tell this story of how our second baby was born, I want to share a quote that speaks to the fact that a mother's love or a parent's love is probably the closest approximation of God's love and of Jesus Christ's love. This quote comes from a general conference talk by Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, who is a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and this is what he says. Prophesying of the Savior's atonement, Isaiah wrote, "He hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows." A majestic latter-day vision emphasized that Jesus came into the world to bear the sins of the world. Both ancient and modern scripture testify that he redeemed them and bore them and carried them all the days of old. A favorite hymn pleads with us to hear your great deliverer's voice. Bear, born, carry, deliver. These are powerful, heartening, messianic words. They convey help and hope for safe movement from where we are to where we need to be, but cannot get without assistance. These words also connote burden, struggle, and fatigue. Words appropriate in describing the mission of him who, at unspeakable cost, lifts us up when we have fallen, carries us forward when strength is gone, delivers us safely home when safety seems far beyond our reach. My Father sent me, he said, that I might be lifted up upon the cross, that as I have been lifted up, even so shall men be lifted up to me. But can you hear in this language another arena of human endeavor in which we use words like bear and born, carry and lift, labor and deliver? As Jesus said to John while in the very act of the atonement, so he says to all of us, "Behold thy mother." Today I declare from this pulpit what has been said here before, that no love in mortality comes closer to approximating the pure love of Jesus Christ than the selfless love a devoted mother has for her child. When Isaiah, speaking messianically, wanted to convey Jehovah's love, he invokes the image of a mother's devotion. Can a woman forget her sucking child, he asks? How absurd, he implies, though not as absurd as thinking Christ will ever forget us. I love those words so much. It rings true to me. Like I said, I don't think I really understood Jesus Christ's love until I became a mom. And now that I feel love for my children, love that could never be tarnished by anything that they do or anything that could happen in this life, this love that just wants the best for them, I feel a lot more confident in Jesus Christ's love for me. If I, an imperfect mortal, can love a little baby so much, then of course Jesus Christ, who is divine, can love us even more. He can love us even more infinitely. That has really hit home to me, especially in the past week as we brought our little baby into this world. With that little spiritual thought, I'm going to just jump into the details of our birth story. This is probably going to become 2 episodes. I want to give a play-by-play of the factual event of the birth story, everything that went down, the timeline, just because I think it's really fun to hear all those details. I love hearing other people's birth stories. If you're a mom and you want to share a birth story, or if you're a dad and you want to share one of your kids' birth stories and you haven't really had a good place to do that yet, hit me up on Instagram and you can send me a voice message telling me everything that went down. It can be so fun to share these stories with people. I would love to hear your story. So this episode is going to be about all the details of when it happened, how it happened. And then in my next episode, I want to share everything that helped this birth go a lot smoother than my first birth to my daughter, Brea. Really, the biggest difference was the mindsets that I had going into the second birth. And I want to share those mindsets that helped me so that other moms that are preparing to give birth, maybe for the first time, or are preparing for their first unmedicated birth, can have these mindsets, these mantras in mind, because they really helped me manage the pain so much better than I did during my first birth. But without further ado, I will jump into the story of how baby bird number 2 was born. Some context. We live in Florida right now. We live on the Panhandle, and our house is in Gulf Breeze. If you can just put this map in your head, it will help you understand a lot of the details of the story better. The Gulf Breeze is right in the middle of the Panhandle. And then if you're looking at a map, to the far left of the Panhandle, or I guess to the west, is Pensacola. And Pensacola is where the birth center that I was going to give birth at, where it's located. And it's about a 30-minute drive from our house in Gulf Breeze to this birth center in Pensacola. And then on the far right to the Panhandle, or to the east, is a city called Destin. And it's about an hour to the east of our house in Gulf Breeze. Destin is an important location for this story because it's where we were having a bird family reunion the week that I was due. I was due August 2nd, so last Saturday, and this family trip to Destin had been planned long before I even knew that I was pregnant. So I found out I was pregnant, and we're like, oh dang, we're gonna be giving birth to a baby probably during this family reunion trip to Destin, which was kind of crazy, but also kind of cool because it meant that all our family was going to be in town close to where we live in Gulf Breeze, and might get to meet the baby when the baby was brand new. So all last week we were staying at a beach house with family in Destin. Not sure when the baby was gonna come, not sure if it was going to be during this family reunion or after the family reunion, but we all kind of hoped it would be during the family reunion so that everyone can meet the new baby. On Tuesday of last week, I started having some very minor contractions. They weren't painful at all, but they were just little cramps. They felt a little bit like period cramps, and they happened sporadically throughout the day on Tuesday. When my daughter Brea was born, I didn't have any contractions until the day I went into labor. So I thought last Tuesday, oh shoot, I'm going into labor tonight. So I rested all day Tuesday. I took a really long nap, and I went to bed really early because I wanted to be super physically prepared for this birth. However, I went to bed that night thinking I would get woken up by more intense contractions during the night because that's what happened with Brea, and I didn't. I slept through the night like a baby. I woke up the next morning feeling super refreshed, but no contractions. They were completely gone. So that was a little weird and surprising, but I was like, all right, I guess that was just a practice round. And the same thing happened that next day on Wednesday. I had minor contractions throughout the day that kind of got more regular towards the afternoon and evening, but then again just went away when I went to sleep. So again, I got a good night's sleep on Wednesday night. And then Thursday night, I didn't have any contractions during the day at all. And I was just a little confused. I'm like, okay, this baby is really trying to surprise us. I have no idea what to expect right now. While we were in Destin, one thing the bird family loves to do is go shark fishing. For most of the nights of the trip, I had missed out on the shark fishing because I told everyone I got to rest up, I've got to prepare for labor, I don't want to be exhausted when I'm in labor. So I would go to bed at like 8 or 9 every night. And shark fishing usually goes till like anywhere from 10 to midnight because that's when the sharks are out and about and biting the bait. But on Thursday, I decided, you know what? These are like the contractions that cried wolf right now. I have no idea when the baby's actually going to come. I don't want to miss out on this opportunity to do shark fishing with my family. My husband's super passionate about it. He was the one leading the charge every night, and so I decided Thursday night, you know what, I'll just do it this one night with everyone. So I stayed out on the beach and we did catch a shark, and it was really fun because Brea was out there with me too, and she got to see the shark and we took a picture with it. She definitely did not understand that sharks are dangerous because as soon as we let the shark back into the ocean, she wanted to run after the shark and she was like, I want to go swimming with the shark. We did not let her, but it was just fun. It was a good, fun memory. So Brea and I ended up going to bed around 10 p.m. after catching that first shark. My husband, T-Bird, did stay up later and he ended up catching another shark that night. And so I went to bed at 10 p.m. And at that point, I was again having these little contractions, but I didn't think it meant anything. Obviously, I thought it was possible I could be going into labor, but after the 2 previous nights, I thought these could just be more practice contractions. So I went to bed at 10 p.m. Then T-Bird came in from shark fishing at midnight, and I heard him come in. It woke me up, and instead of being able to go back to sleep like normal, I was laying in bed and I'm like, dang, I actually am having contractions. These are kind of hard to sleep through. They were still feeling like period cramps, but a little more intense, not unbearable by any means, but more intense and more regular. It felt like they were happening probably every 6 minutes. So I decided, okay, I can't sleep. I don't want to just be laying in bed hoping that I can go to sleep. That's a recipe for not sleeping for me, is laying in bed hoping I'll go to sleep. So I decided I was just going to keep myself busy and see if the contractions built or if they went away, and then if they went away, I could go back to sleep. So I actually hopped on my laptop and I edited last week's podcast episode. That took me about 2 hours, and by the time I was done editing and uploading it, the contractions were more intense, and I was pretty sure that I was going into labor. They were getting to the point where I would be editing my podcast and I would have a contraction come and I would need to stop what I was doing and breathe for a second to get through it. I downloaded the contraction timer app on my phone and I started timing them, and they were around 5 or 6 minutes apart. Because they were so regular, I thought, okay, this is probably actually labor. At that point, it was about 2:30 a.m. and I wanted to let my husband sleep as long as possible because I knew he had gone to bed at midnight. I wanted to let him sleep as long as possible before I woke him up, because for us, labor has been a 2-person job. My husband is basically my birth doula, and I really want him to be awake and engaged during the labor. So I decided I was going to try to let him sleep as long as I could. So I decided I'm going to go take a shower. I took a really nice long shower, which helped with the pain. And then I went downstairs and made myself a yogurt bowl, because I remembered during my last labor with Freya, I didn't really eat anything for the first part of the labor. And then by the time my body was getting hungry, the contractions were so intense that I felt extremely nauseous and I wasn't able to keep any food down. And that made her birth really difficult because I was so energy deprived. So at this point, it's about 3 a.m. and I just thought, okay, this is probably my last chance to get a solid meal in before things start getting really, really intense and I can't even eat food. So I made myself a yogurt bowl, and after I finished eating that, I went back upstairs and I woke up T-Bird and I said, hey, I'm having intense contractions. I think we should drive home. Our plan was to drive from the beach house in Destin to our house in Gulf Breeze. So drive an hour there and then continue laboring at our house so that we would be closer to the midwife. And then once my contractions got about 4 minutes apart, that's when we would head to the midwife in Pensacola. So we had about an hour and a half of driving ahead of us, and I wanted to knock out this first hour of driving at about 3:30 a.m. because that's when my contractions were getting pretty intense, and I was pretty confident that we would want to be at the midwife within the next few hours. So my husband woke up, he got dressed real quick, and then we told my mother-in-law, hey, we're going into labor. So my mother-in-law was aware that if Brea woke up, she would need a friend. And then we left. We got in the car, left the beach house in Destin, and drove the hour to our house in Gulf Breeze. As we were driving, we were playing worship music. We were playing a lot of Forrest Frank, who's our favorite artist of all time. Something that helped me a lot during Brea's labor and this one was listening to spiritual songs. It really keeps me grounded in the fact that God has control and I don't. And also, it feels way better to me to be belting out worship music than just listening to myself scream or moan in pain. So we listened to lots of Forrest on the drive. We did lots of singing, and it was fun because at this point the date was August 1st, and that was the release date of Forrest's most recent song that he released, which is the song Lemonade. It's a really good one. You should go listen to it. It was so fun to think that Forrest released this song on the same day that our baby was going to be born. We had lots of fun jamming to that. I say fun, but there was a lot of intensity on my side. A lot of intense breathing through those contractions. When we got to our house in Gulf Breeze, we walked up the stairs to our house, typed in the code, opened the door, and walked inside, and immediately I knew the AC is broken in our house right now because it didn't feel any different between the warm, humid Florida air outside and the muggy air inside our house. We learned in that moment that while we had been on this vacation in Destin, the AC at our house had gone out. We looked at the thermostat and it was 95 degrees in our house. And immediately we both just knew we are not laboring here. We're not going to labor at this house. It was crazy too because it was raining outside. So it felt better to be outside than in our house. So I went outside on the porch. I'm like bent over against the porch rail, just swaying back and forth, breathing through my contractions while my husband calls our midwife to see, hey, is there any way that we can come into the birthing center right now and just get there early and labor in the birth center? And our midwife asked how far apart the contractions were, and we told her, and she was just kind of like, well, if you get there and you're not dilated enough yet, which I think I had to be at least 5 centimeters dilated in order to stay at the birth center, she told us that she would have to turn us away. We didn't really want to do that. At this point, it was 5 a.m. and I didn't want to make her leave home at 5 a.m. and then have her discover that I wasn't far enough along to stay at the birth center and have woken her up and made her get out of bed early for nothing. So we told her, okay, we will just find a hotel and labor there until things are more serious. We hopped in the car and we started driving towards Pensacola, and my husband starts calling all these hotels. This is the part of the story that I want to turn over to him. I think he will do an awesome job of telling how he got us through this sticky situation. Honestly, we felt like we were Mary and Joseph in this moment. It was so funny. We were just like, we have nowhere to labor right now, and we're driving around looking for an inn that will let us stay and labor our baby in one of their hotel rooms. So without further ado, I will turn the time over to my wonderful husband, Trenton, also known as T-Bird.
What's up, everybody? How are you? How are you doing? Welcome to Flying with the Birds. I am your guest today on Brooklyn's podcast. My name is Trenton. I will be breaking down for you what went down that night when we got to our house at 4 in the morning and it was 95 degrees. So we hop in the car and we're driving to Pensacola. It's like 4 in the morning, trying to find somewhere for my wife to labor. And we start calling hotels, and the first hotel we call, I thought it would be smart to lead with the fact that she was in labor, thinking that they would have compassion upon us and hook us up, when in reality, I think it just turned them off to the idea of welcoming us into their hotels. This happened to be a Residence Inn, and I said, well, I guess there's no room in the inn. And the lady said, what? And I was like, I guess there's no room in the inn. And the lady was like, what? And I was about to say it again. And Brooklyn was very passionately saying, hang up the phone and call a different hotel that can actually fit us in, which is what I'm sure Mary said the same thing to Joseph. Like, T-Bird, just hang up the phone and call another hotel. And the lady's like, can't you take her to the emergency room if she's in pain? And I was like, she doesn't get it. So we just hung up. Called another one. Number 2, same thing, no room in the inn. Thankfully, number 3, Brooklyn told me not to lead with the fact that she was in labor, which got us a room in the hotel. However, we pull up to this hotel and this cat, I'm like, hey, we just need a room for like 5 hours. We're going to be going to the midwife place soon. And this guy's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Let me take down your info. And I thought he was going to hook us up. And then he's like, it's going to be $300. 300 something. And I was like, for 5 hours? We're not even staying overnight, dude. It's like 5 in the morning. He's like, yeah, well, that's how it works. And I was like, dude, my wife is in labor. We're not going to be here very long. Can we just like labor in the lobby then or something? And he's like, let me see what I can do. And then he's like, yeah, actually, I just can't do anything. I tried to call the manager's sleeping because it's 5 a.m. And so I know that Brooklyn is more important than money. So I'm about to drop 300 bones on this temporary room when I had the bright idea to run out in the parking lot and find someone this dude just checked out of his hotel room. His name's Will, dude. I have a selfie with him. I said, Will, I need your key card. And he's like, oh, he was confused. I said, Will, look, my wife is in labor. She's going to give birth in the next like 5 or 6 hours, but we need somewhere to labor before we can go to the birthing center. So I need you to come into the hotel and tell this guy behind the counter that we're homies, and I'm just going to be borrowing your room for a few hours before you check out. So Will hooks us up, walks in. He says, hey, this is my guy. He's going to actually just be in my room for a few hours before I check out. Will left, and the guy behind the counter is like, man, I would have tried to cheat the system, but I don't know how. I think he was like a rookie or something. And I said, yeah, no worries. Like, I cheated it for you. And he thought that was clever. So anyways, good move. Hotel hack for any of you. If your wife goes into labor, make sure that you use that one. It's called the T-Bird Special. Now, we got the key card and took Brooklyn up. And thankfully this guy was a very clean dude. His room was like, it was like brand new. So we got in there, dude, we chilled. I'll tell you a tip, a word to my husbands out there. If your wife is having a contraction, don't ask questions. No questions, no talking, no nothing. Just like some mild support and encouragement, not too much, but just let her know you're there. I learned to offer counter pressure. You can like push on their hips and like, I don't know, like maybe every girl's different, but you got to find where you can help if they're willing. If they don't want to accept your help, then you should probably just not do anything. But if they're open to it, it can be helpful if you just kind of like flow with it and be there and be present and don't fall asleep. Okay, so anyways, Brooklyn wasn't sure if she had to drop a dookie or drop a baby. So we got on the phone with our midwife and she's like, should you come in? We're not sure. But really, in reality, Brooklyn was just bawling out, dude. She was like crushing this labor, which is why we weren't even sure if the baby was coming. And so we're like, okay, we should just be safe and go in and check it. And then bam, dude, there's a baby. Brooklyn pushed like 3 times, caught the baby, one-handed, bro, like Odell Beckham, and then landed it right on her chest. And it was phenomenal. An incredible performance. I would say 10 out of 10. And yeah, so it was pretty simple. Like from that point, once we had the hotel room locked down, yeah, it was pretty good. And now we have a little peanut. So good birth story, Brooklyn. Thanks for doing it and taking me for the ride. And also we forgot to mention, I don't know how Brooklyn will clip this into the podcast, but that night we went 2 for 2 on our sharks and we caught some big dogs. This bull shark we caught was a fatty pig. And we pulled that thing up on the beach like midnight, went in, went to sleep, and then had a baby. So that's an important detail, is catch a fish on the night you have a baby.
Thanks, Robert. Okay. So, yes, my wonderful husband got us into this hotel room, and I think we checked into the hotel around like 5:30 a.m. or something. At that point, the contractions were really, really intense. I was breathing extremely deeply through them, and I was getting pretty exhausted too. My legs were getting really tired because I was finding that the most comfortable positions to get through a contraction in required some pressure on my legs, whether that was standing, leaning against the wall, or kneeling on the bed, being on all fours. And so my legs were getting exhausted, and I was just thinking, man, like, this is why people get epidurals. I had the same thought when I was giving birth to Brea too. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, an epidural making this pain go away sounds really nice right now. But I'm stubborn, and I knew I was gonna get through it. And
let me just add, just because you're in pain doesn't mean that it's bad. Now, I didn't give birth, so I probably can't comment here, but me and Brooklyn have been talking about this a lot recently, how a lot of things we think are bad are actually just normal, and they could be good if you reframe it that way. And anyways, me and Brooklyn talked about that and birth a lot because she was in pain, but it doesn't mean just because you're in pain, you should not be in pain anymore. And like Brooklyn embraced the pain, and it was awesome because then a baby popped out. And it was amazing.
Yeah, that's something I'm going to talk a lot about on the next episode, was how I thought differently about the pain this time around than I did with Brea. But it was cool because when I was in this hotel room, really struggling, T-Bird and I were actually having a conversation about how fearing pain makes the pain so much worse, whereas being curious about it and letting it happen and believing that it's getting you where you want to go actually can make it so much more manageable.
And literally 3 days before this, I got stung by a jellyfish. And I was just thinking about how if you think about getting stung by a jellyfish, it's scary and it feels painful. But when you actually get stung by a jellyfish, it's actually not that bad. It kind of hurts a lot, but it's not as bad as the fear of getting stung by a jellyfish. And I think the same thing applies to birth.
Yeah, T-Bird told me that story when I was laboring, and then he's like, but what do I know? I'm just a boy. And I will say, I think that childbirth is probably more painful than getting stung by a jellyfish, but like you said, the principle is the same. It's just taken to a whole other level when you're pushing a human out of you. Anyways, by around 9:30 a.m., the intensity was just out of this world. However, I still thought it's only 9:30 a.m. And when I gave birth to Brea, I went into labor around the same time, around midnight, and I didn't give birth to her until 3:15 p.m. And so I was expecting to be going for another, 6 or 7 hours. So I was hesitant to call our midwife because I didn't want to give her another false alarm after our call about the AC earlier. But we decided to call her because I was having this urge to push, and I wasn't sure if I was just having a weird bowel movement or if it was the baby's trying to come out. So we called her and she's like, well, what do you think? And I was like, I don't know. This is only my second birth. This seems too soon almost, just because my other labor went so much longer. But that urge to push is really what was making me question everything. So she said, okay, well, if you've been laboring since midnight, you're probably far enough along to come to the birthing center. So I'll meet you there at like 10:20. And then I was like, okay, yeah, we can wait. And then she's like, okay, let's do 10. So we left the hotel pretty quick after that and drove to the birth center. We met my midwife there. She let us in and she decided to give me a cervical check to see how far along I was, to see if they could even admit me at the birth center. And I was just praying in this moment. I'm like, I just want to be at least like 7 centimeters dilated, because it was so intense and I just didn't know how much more intense it could get before, I don't know, I passed out or something. And she checked me and she said, well, no wonder it's getting so intense. You're complete. And those were the most beautiful words I've ever heard anyone speak in the English language. I was so grateful. I was fully effaced. I was fully dilated. And she's like, this baby is about to come out. So we basically ran over to the birthing room and I was supposed to have a water birth, or at least have the tub available for me to get birth in, but we didn't even have time to fill it up before I was on the bed pushing this baby out. So we got to the birthing center at 10, and as we neared 10:30, I started pushing. I pushed one time and broke my water, pushed one more time and out came baby's head, and then pushed one last time and the whole baby came out. And I had told my midwife in advance, I want to try catching this baby myself. And I'm so happy that I actually was able to. I had my hands ready below me to catch the baby when the baby came out. I did get a little help from my midwife because I think she just wanted to make sure nothing bad happened for liability purposes. But I caught the baby and I brought baby to my chest and I just started laughing, like just bust out laughing, because that immediate relief of the pain being gone and the baby being here it's incomparable. It is so happy. And I just let myself laugh hysterically for like a few seconds. And then my midwife's like, okay, well, I don't think we know the baby's gender yet, right? I had purposely tried not to let anyone see the baby's gender because I wanted to catch the baby and peek at the gender before anyone else did and tell them what the baby's gender was. So after my midwife said that, I pulled baby away from me a little bit, looked down, and I was so disoriented and confused. I saw the umbilical cord and I wasn't sure if it was an umbilical cord or a baby's private parts. And so I had to do like 3 takes before finally I figured it out. I put the pieces together and I told everyone, it's a girl, it's baby Scotty, which is the name we had picked in advance for our baby girl. Funny detail here is my husband actually did see the gender before I did because I had to do so many takes, but he was super nice and didn't say anything. He let me figure it out first before celebrating with me. Man, we are so happy to have baby Scotty in our family. We're so happy to have 2 little girls now. It is a dream come true. Scotty is so peaceful and observant. It has been so sweet to just have Scotty's little peaceful spirit in our home. And Brea has been such a good big sister. I think she's still getting used to everything, but she gives Scotty the best kisses. She loves to talk about how cute Scotty is. We're so happy. Our hearts keep growing with every new baby in our family, and I'm so grateful that we get to experience this. This is what life is all about. This is truly the best part of life, is being parents and welcoming these little angels into our homes.
And my dad's name was Scott, and so that's where baby Scotty comes from, because he died like a month ago, which is really sad. But I was really stoked that it was a girl, because baby Scotty is going to live on and it'll be awesome.
And I'm sure T-Bird's dad is so thrilled that we caught a shark just like 12 hours before Scotty arrived. That's like a dream come true.
We have a labor picture with a shark.
I was having contractions during that picture, yeah. But anyways.
Okay, I need to do a solo section.
Okay.
Really quick, and then you can come back. Also, Forrest Frank dropped his Lemonade song that morning, so shout out Forrest. Thanks for the baby song. Now, word to my husbands out there again, and really to everybody who doesn't know how birth works, because I had no idea how birth worked until I witnessed it. Basically, what happens is your wife, the woman, her insides start squeezing and opening this giant hole in the bottom of them to push the baby out, because I had no idea how the baby was going to fit out of there. That was crazy. And then basically it goes on for hours and hours. Every 5 to 10 minutes it squeezes, and they get closer and closer together until it's like every 3 minutes, and it squeezes and then it pulls and it creates this giant hole. It opens the hole wider and wider and wider until the baby can fit out. So if you ever hear the word contraction, that's actually what a contraction is. And labor is apparently having contractions for some time to make the hole bigger so the baby can pop out. So there's a little biology lesson for all my homies out there who don't know how it works yet. That's how it works, and it's amazing. So we'll catch you next time. Peace out, flying with the birds. Deuces.
This episode is probably the most entertaining one yet. Tell me if you think I should have my husband on here more often. When we were dating, we actually talked about having a podcast together, and he even proposed to me in
That's how I proposed, dog, in the studio.
in a podcast recording studio, and we said we were going to call our podcast Flying with the Birds. So that's where the name is coming from. Who knows, maybe we'll do that someday. But for now, thanks so much for listening to Walk Beside Me. Don't forget to leave a rating and review. Also, send this episode to a friend. This would be a really good one for anyone who is expecting a baby and just wants to know what a birth can look like, especially someone that's interested in doing an unmedicated birth at home or in a birthing center. That's how I've done both of my births, unmedicated and in a birthing center, and they have been the most challenging and beautiful experiences of my life. So I love to share these stories, and I would love to encourage anyone, if you have any questions about natural birth, please send me a message on Instagram. And
Don't fear the birthing center. Your body knows what it's doing. A birth is not a medical procedure. I mean, sometimes it is, but like, that's not how it's intended to be. So trust yourself, dude.
on that note, we will sign off, and I will talk to you all next week.